Hey guys, in this video I wanted to go over some of the tools that you might be using throughout this electrical class. We're going to talk about strippers, crimpers, screwdrivers, and we're going to actually try to demonstrate the way that these are supposed to be used. So probably during the time you're taking this class, the most labor intensive or annoying thing you're going to have to do is you're going to be stripping a lot of wire. Not one or two wires, but a lot, okay? So I wanted to kind of go through a few different styles that there are out there, and then kind of actually show you how to use each one. Not to say you're going to be using them in this class, but it's possible that throughout your career you might need those, okay? So the first one I want to point out is probably the most popular style you're going to see. This is actually a personal pair of mine. You can see that at the very top, all these, let's try to show you this. At the very top, we have all these holes. These are for stripping. We do have a pair of pliers up here at the top. It's not very common to use these, but if you had to pull something out or per se pull a wire or whatever, we have a pair of cutters down here. And then these holes indicate a screw size that you can screw in and actually cut small screws. Very popular to use these to cut small screws. In fact, it's probably the best way to cut them. And then here at the bottom, we have crimpers. And what we can do is we actually will put some crimpers in there and you can squeeze down and to crimp them, okay? In a second, I'm going to show you how to use these for stripping, but first I want to point out another style. So this is another style of crimpers that you might use, okay? How it works is these ones are just the pliers, the actual stripping tool, and then the cutters, okay? These ones are just a little more purpose-built. These ones are a lot easier to use. I like these. They're a lot cheaper. Some of the parts on this guy right here are actually not that great. These crimpers kind of suck. So if you are going to do some crimping, what I would recommend is you actually buy a purpose-built set. Purpose-built set of Snap-on crimpers, or any other style of crimpers probably is just as good, but an actual purpose-built one is probably the best. All right. So what I want to do is I want to give you a demonstration on how to use these crimpers, and we have a couple tips that I want to tell you about. First tip is we have the coating on the outside here, this red coating. This is just an insulator, and so we need to get that off so that we can connect it to a component or something like that to transfer the power. But we don't want to strip off all of it. What we want to do is we want to strip off about 3/16, but no more than probably 1/4 of an inch, and depending on what you have to work on. What you want to do is you want to make sure that there's no excess wire or bare wire hanging out of a component. We do this so that way if something touches it or another wire touches it, it won't make contact and create a short to ground. If you do have this problem or short to ground, what will happen is it will actually cause the breaker to blow or possibly cause some damage to another piece. So you want to make sure that you don't leave any bare wire hanging around. So I'm going to demonstrate really quickly how to use this. We're going to find the circle that best fits our wire. So I have a number 12 gauge wire. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look for the 12 gauge slot. It's right here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get it on there. I like to twist it around a little bit, just kind of wiggle it, and then just pull it off. All right. And what you can see, oops, let me back up. What you can see here is now there's a bare wire hanging out, and it's not damaged. One of the things you want to make sure is you don't put it into a slot or a hole that is too small. Otherwise, it'll actually cut into that copper and then create a smaller wire that could overheat over time and could cause damage or a fire. So those are some really helpful tips with these two styles of wire cutters and strippers. I'm going to move on to a style that is not quite as popular. I don't know if you guys have ever seen these. Again, the strippers up here. We've got a cutter right here. I don't know if you can totally see that. And then we've got some other styles of crimpers right here. This is not a pair that I particularly like, so we'll go ahead and cut this off. They don't cut very good either. And then what we'll do is you can put this guy in here, and it'll go ahead and it'll cut it like this. So then you could just pull off the excess. These are not a pair that I particularly love, but they are a pair that if you like this style, some people love it, some people hate it. Definitely recommend just having a pair of wire clippers rather than using a knife, or wire strippers rather than using a knife. Okay, last style I want to show you, these ones are really cool. Look like a T-Rex, pretty awesome. We got our cutters right here. You can see it right here. And then we got our stripper up here. So what we're going to do, we'll throw this guy, cuts it really easily, and then we're going to put it into the teeth, and it strips it off. Super easy. Love these guys. Again, make sure if you want to do some crimping tools, this is an awesome one to get. We're going to show you how to use these in a minute. But first, now that we have a wire that is cut, I want to show you how to attach it to a component. We're going to go ahead and we're going to cut this one just a hair shorter. It looks like it cut it a little bit long. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and show you how to connect this wire to a component. So before we go ahead and connect that thing to, or connect a wire to a component, I want to talk a little bit about screwdrivers. We've got two main styles that we will be using. There are more styles out there. We've got a flat tip and we've got a Phillips head, okay? Notice on these particular sets of screwdrivers that the plastic extends all along the shank. We do have some other ones that don't, such as this one. The reason that you'll have some that will have that shank covered and some that won't is because you don't want to make contact with some electrical devices. So these are actual electrical screwdrivers, all right? There's nothing wrong with using this one. You just want to make sure that for our purposes, there's nothing wrong. You want to make sure that you have the power turned off. That way there's no possible problem. Now, the main thing I want to point out is different size screwdrivers are used for different size stuff, okay? These are two connectors, terminal connectors. Notice that the screws on this one are quite a bit bigger than the screws on this one. You can't even hardly see them inside there, okay? If you use the wrong screwdriver and force it into this plastic, you'll break the plastic and you'll possibly strip out the screw in there. So make sure that you're using the proper type of screwdriver when you're attaching a wire or even just assembling something, all right? It's a good rule of thumb just to always kind of watch out for. So let's go ahead and we're going to attach a wire to this timer. And I'm just going to remove the timer because there's no point in having the timer attached to the body, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to slide the wire in here, and we can see that there is no coating being, or no bare wire that's extending past this connector, all right? So then we would come in with our screwdriver, that screw down, okay? And you just want to make sure it's good and tight. Don't do it so tight that you strip out the screw or possibly the threads on the screw, all right, or screw head. So some of the other styles of connectors that you're going to be needing to do, especially working on the residential side of things, are connecting into some plugs and some switches here. Now, I've got both of these out for a reason, and that is because they actually have different connection styles. This one right here, you actually hook it into the screws, while these ones actually have a little hole here on there's all four corners has one, and you plug the wire in and then tighten the screw down. So I just want to quickly demonstrate that for you guys. We're going to start with this one. If you have a screw style clamp on the side of your plug or outlet, you're going to take a wire, you're going to bend it into a hook just like this. You're going to go ahead and you're going to try to wrap it around that wire, okay? So you're going to wrap it around just like that and lock it down. Another way would be, you can see this one actually has a little bit of a cage here, and it creates a flat. This flat you can just go ahead and insert that wire into and clamp it down. Not every type of connector has this, so just kind of be aware, and sometimes you got to make a hook, sometimes you just kind of shove it in, all right? So moving on to our other style here. Some of these are actually made so either you can just push them in and they clamp and they won't come back out. But these ones that we have right here are not. So you're going to go ahead and push it into the little hole, and then you're just going to go ahead and tighten that screw up. And you can see it's nice and tight now, okay? So sometimes in a residential or even a commercial type building, we have to connect wires. Now there's a couple rules with connecting wires in those residential and commercial atmospheres. You can never do that inside, like internally in a wall. All connections need to be made inside of a box, and we will expect you to do those kind of connections in a box here in our lab too. So some of the wire nuts that I want to talk about real quick they're pretty much not, they're just general wire nuts. But what I wanted to show you is there's a few different sizes. So what I typically do is I sometimes if you have to put 3 wires together, you can use like a yellow one. Sometimes it's just 2. You can get away with using this orange one. The colors are not standardized; they're all over the place. So just try one out and see if it fits, and if it pulls tight, you're good to go. Okay. How you use this one is we got 2 wires. We've already stripped them down. What I like to do is twist them together, and then take my wire nut, place it over, and then you're just going to start spinning it on. And you're going to see that it starts getting tight. Once it's good and tight, you're all done. One thing you want to make sure is that there's no copper hanging out here. That way we can make sure we don't have a short to ground. Okay, so moving on to connectors. Now connectors will typically be used on like automobiles, cars, things like that. So this is just really good, helpful tips for you. Typically they're not very popular to use in a residential setting, but because I got you here, I wanted to make sure we showed you how to do it. Because this might actually help you in your personal life right now a lot more. Go to wire in new lights in your truck or something like that. This is how you would do it, okay? So there are a couple different types of connectors that you can get. The most popular style is going to be a butt connector like this. You can see that this one's got heat shrink on it. This one's a different color. Different colors usually are typically determine different sizes. If you actually look at them, and I don't think we can show this on camera because they're just kind of hard to see. I think this one is a 14 to 16 gauge wire, okay? And this one's a 20, or this red one's a 20 to 18, all right? So that kind of tells you what size wires are going to be used, so that way you can use the correct connector when you're hooking up something, all right? So what I want to do, and then some other styles here. You also have a spade connector is what this one's called. This one would be for actually making a connection that you could come back and pull apart later, all right? We also have an eyelet connector. How an eyelet works is this might be on the top of a really small battery. It could be a grounding lug or something like that on the frame. So what I wanted to quickly show you guys is just how to connect these things, or crimp them down, I should say. So we got our connector here, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to push our wire that we've already stripped up until we can just barely see it. Then I'm going to take my crimping tool, and there's 2 small crimpers in here, and I don't know if you can see that there's one up here and then there's one down here. Typically this one's used for heat shrink, and this one's kind of used for everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to put it inside there, and you can kind of see now that we got it, and we're going to go ahead and we're just going to squeeze it down and crush that. All right, this one didn't, the plastic didn't like that very much, so these are pretty cheap connectors, but now it's on there nice and tight, good connection. All right, the next one I want to show you, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a heat shrink connector. This is our heat shrink. This one's a blue one. This is the correct size wire for blue, just so you know. We're going to go ahead and we're just going to slip it in. Notice that it's kind of hard to see on camera, but again, there's no bare wire hanging out. It's all inside this metal tube, all right? So we're going to go ahead and take our crimpers. We're going to go up to the next one. We're going to go ahead and just crimp it down, and you're done. We're going to go ahead and I want to crimp on the other side of this really quick. I like to twist my wires. That way they just kind of stay all together when you're trying to put them in that tube. We're going to go ahead, slip it inside. Go ahead and crimp it down. I'm going to go ahead and cut that a little shorter so it's not in our way. And then I want to talk a little bit about heat shrink. So these little ends here are what we call heat shrink, and this is a heat shrink connector. Heat shrink is usually in its own tube form, and you could go ahead and you could solder that connection and then put a heat shrink over it, and that'll seal it so that way no water or contaminants can get inside. So these ones are kind of the really awesome, because then you just quickly connect them and heat shrink it up. Later on in the course we are going to go over soldering, but right now we're just going over crimping, and we'll get to that point. All right, so let me go ahead and I'm going to show you how to heat shrink this down. All right, so all I've got is a heat gun. You will oftentimes see them as just a torch. You can see people use them as those little Bic lighters. They've got butane ones. I like these heat guns mainly because they won't burn the wire unless you get really close. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to turn it on. I put mine on high, and then we're just going to go ahead and it's going to start warming up. and we're going to go ahead and just start working around it. You see it's already starting to suck in. It's just kind of melting it along. And we're just going to work back and forth all the way around this. Couple things I want you to notice is now I kind of stop once it gets clear, and it's all nice and tight all the way around that wire, and that's going to make sure that you have the perfect seal. All right, let's go ahead and I'll do this one really quick for you, and then we'll be done. All right. All right, all done. So that kind of concludes our kind of brief overview of all the tools. Next, we're going to go on and we're going to talk about multimeters, and then we're going to start actually getting out there, wiring up some stuff, and actually testing with those multimeters. So if you have any questions on butt connectors, crimping, any tools, please let me know. Thanks.